There comes a time in life when you realize that everything you've been searching for, peace, happiness, fulfillment, has never been in the places you've looked. You've spent years chasing after achievements, relationships, and external validation, believing that once you have them, you will finally feel complete. But every time you reach a goal, the satisfaction is temporary, and soon you find yourself searching again, convinced that the missing piece is still out there, just beyond your reach. But what if the search itself is the problem? What if happiness was never something you had to find, but something you had to uncover within yourself? Most people go through life feeling restless, always longing for something more. They assume that if they just achieve enough, if they just prove themselves, if they just become the person the world expects them to be, they will finally feel at peace. But Buddhism teaches that wholeness is not something you create. It is something you remember. It is something that has always been inside of you, hidden beneath layers of conditioning, fear, and attachment. The more you seek happiness in external things, the more you disconnect from this truth. But the moment you stop searching, the moment you turn inward, you realize that what you've been looking for has been within you all along. Imagine a person lost in a dense forest, desperately searching for a way out. They wander endlessly, convinced that if they just keep moving, they will eventually find the path. But what they do not realize is that the more they struggle, the more lost they become. If they would just stop, just be still for a moment, they would hear the sound of the river nearby, leading them home. This is how most people live, always chasing the next thing, always convinced that happiness is somewhere in the future, never realizing that it was available to them all along, right here in the present moment. The reason people struggle to find peace is because they believe it comes from acquiring something new, more success, more recognition, more love. But true happiness is not about having more. It is about needing less. The world tells you that you need to add things to your life to be happy. But what if happiness comes not from addition, but from subtraction? What if peace is not found in getting what you want, but in letting go of everything that is unnecessary? Gratitude is one of the most powerful ways to shift your perspective. When you focus on what is missing, you create suffering. But when you focus on what is already present, you create joy. No matter where you are in life, there is always something to be grateful for. The warmth of the sun, the sound of laughter, the ability to take a deep breath. These small moments, when fully appreciated, are what true happiness is made of. But most people do not see this because they are too busy looking ahead, always waiting for something bigger, something better. They believe that once they reach a certain point, then they will finally be happy. But happiness is not a destination. It is a state of being. It is not something you arrive at. It is something you cultivate moment by moment, by choosing to be present, by choosing to let go of the belief that something is missing. Think of a child playing. They do not worry about the future. They are not concerned with what they lack. They are simply immersed in the moment, fully engaged, fully alive. But as we grow older, we lose this ability. We become trapped in our minds, caught up in worries, regrets, and expectations. We forget how to just be. But happiness is not complicated. It is found in the same place it always was, in the present moment. Ask yourself, how often do you truly experience life as it is happening? How often are you fully engaged in what you are doing without thinking about what comes next. Most people live either in the past or the future. They replay old mistakes, or they worry about what has not yet happened. But the past is gone. The future is unknown. The only thing that is real is this moment. And the more you learn to be present, the more you realize that happiness was never something you had to chase. It was something you only had to notice. Meditation is one of the most powerful tools for training the mind to be present. It teaches you to observe your thoughts without being controlled by them, to bring your attention back to the now, to experience life without the constant pull of worry and regret. Through meditation, you begin to see that most of your suffering is self-created, that most of your fears exist only in your mind. The mind is like a storm, constant movement, endless noise. But beneath the storm, beneath the thoughts, beneath the emotions, there's a deep, still space. And in that stillness, there is peace. Imagine standing in a river, trying to hold on to the water. No matter how tightly you grip, it slips through your fingers. But if you stop trying to control it, if you simply let it flow, you can enjoy the coolness of the water without resistance. This is how life works. The more you try to control everything, the more you suffer. The more you let go, the more peace you find. But letting go does not mean giving up. It does not mean you stop striving or stop caring. It means you stop attaching your happiness to specific outcomes. It means you trust that even if things do not go as planned, life is still unfolding exactly as it should. It means you accept that change is inevitable, and instead of resisting it, you learn to move with it. Think of the seasons. The leaves do not resist when it is time to fall. The river does not fight against the current. Nature moves effortlessly, without attachment, without fear. And yet, humans resist. They cling to things that are meant to pass. They hold on to relationships that no longer serve them. They fear change, even when it is necessary for growth. But suffering comes not from change itself, but from the refusal to accept it. Ask yourself, what are you still holding on to that is causing you pain? What thoughts, what fears, what expectations are keeping you from being fully present? And what would happen if just for a moment you let them go? Most people believe that if they let go, they will lose something important. But the truth is, when you let go, you gain something even greater. Freedom. Freedom from worry. Freedom from fear. Freedom from the belief that your happiness depends on things outside of yourself. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that you no longer need to prove anything to anyone. That you no longer need things to be perfect in order to feel at peace. That you are content, not because everything in your life is exactly as you want it to be, but because you have learned to find joy in the present, to embrace life as it is. This is not an impossible dream. This is something you can cultivate step by step, by shifting your perspective, by practicing gratitude, by learning to let go of control, by choosing to be present. Take a deep breath. Feel the stillness around you. Know that in this moment, you are enough. You have always been enough. And the more you embrace the now, the more you will realize that happiness was never something you had to chase. It was always within you, waiting to be seen. There comes a moment when you realize that the life you have been living is not the one you truly want. You have spent so much time chasing things, believing that success, approval, or love from others will finally give you the sense of wholeness you long for. But deep down, a quiet voice whispers that something is missing. that no matter how much you achieve, how much you gain, how many people praise you, it never feels like enough. And this is because true fulfillment does not come from the outside, it comes from within. Buddhism teaches that suffering arises when we attach ourselves to things that are temporary, expecting them to give us permanent happiness. And yet, this is how most people live, clinging to relationships, possessions, identities, believing that if they can just hold on tightly enough, they will be safe. But life does not work that way. Everything changes. Nothing lasts forever. And the more you resist this truth, the more you suffer. But when you learn to accept impermanence, when you embrace the flow of life instead of fighting against it, you discover something unexpected, a deep and lasting peace. Most people do not realize that they are the creators of their own suffering. They believe that their pain comes from external circumstances, things not going as planned, people not treating them the way they want, life not unfolding the way they expected. But suffering does not come from what happens to us. It comes from our resistance to what happens. It comes from our belief that life should be different than it is. But what if, instead of resisting, you accepted? What if, instead of trying to control everything, you trusted? Imagine standing in the middle of a river, trying to stop the water from flowing. No matter how strong you are, no matter how hard you try, the river will keep moving. And the more you resist, the more exhausted you become. But what happens when you stop fighting? When you let go and allow the water to carry you? You find that the struggle was never necessary. That peace was never about stopping the current. It was about learning to move with it. This is how life works. The more you try to control it, the more you suffer. The more you cling to things that are meant to change, the more pain you create for yourself. But the moment you surrender, the moment you trust, the moment you stop grasping for something outside of yourself to complete you, you find that peace was never something you had to earn. It was something that was always available, waiting for you to stop running long enough to see it. But how do you let go when your entire life has been built around holding on? How do you stop chasing when your mind has been conditioned to believe that happiness is always just one step ahead? The first step is awareness. Begin to notice how often your thoughts pull you away from the present moment. Notice how much time you spend worrying about things you cannot control, replaying past mistakes, fearing the future. And then ask yourself, what if I let this go? What if I trusted that everything is unfolding exactly as it is meant to? Most people fear letting go because they believe that if they do, they will lose something important. But in reality, letting go is the only way to gain something even greater, freedom. When you release the need for control, you gain peace. When you stop clinging to the past, you gain presence. When you stop fearing change, you gain the ability to truly live. Think of a tree in autumn. It does not try to hold on to its leaves when they are meant to fall. It does not fight against the seasons. It allows nature to take its course, trusting that new leaves will grow when the time is right. But humans resist this truth. We hold on to things long after they are meant to leave. We cling to relationships that no longer serve us. We grasp at old identities, afraid of what will happen if we change. And in doing so, we create our own suffering. But what would happen if you trusted that every ending is also a beginning? What if you believed that what is meant for you will never require you to cling to it? What if, instead of fearing change, you embraced it. Buddhism teaches that true freedom comes not from getting what you want, but from learning to want less. The less you need, the lighter you become. The fewer attachments you have, the less suffering you experience. And yet, most people believe that happiness comes from more. More success, more love, more possessions. But happiness is not found in addition. It is found in subtraction. It is found in removing the barriers that keep you from experiencing the peace that is already here. But how do you practice this in daily life? How do you teach your mind to let go when it has spent years holding on? The answer is not in forcing yourself to forget, but in seeing things clearly. In recognizing that attachment creates suffering, that control is an illusion, that the only way to truly be free is to stop resisting what is. Meditation is one of the most powerful tools for this practice. It teaches you to sit with your thoughts without being controlled by them, to observe your mind without attachment. Through meditation, you begin to realize that you are not your thoughts. You are not your fears. You are not the endless stream of worries that run through your mind. You are something deeper. And the more you connect with this stillness, the more you realize that peace is not something you have to search for. It is something that appears the moment you stop searching. Imagine sitting by a campfire, watching the flames flicker. You do not try to control the fire. You do not try to hold on to the smoke. You simply watch, knowing that everything is temporary, that everything is meant to rise and fade in its own time. This is how you must learn to see life. When something arises, let it come. When it fades, let it go. Do not cling. Do not resist. Trust that whatever is meant for you will stay, and whatever is not will leave. But letting go is not just about the past. It is also about the future. Most suffering comes not from what has happened, but from our fears about what is yet to come. We worry, we plan, we try to control, believing that if we just prepare enough, we can avoid pain. But life is unpredictable. No amount of planning can change that. And the more you try to control the future, the more you miss the present. Ask yourself, how much time do you spend worrying about things that have not happened? How much energy do you waste trying to prepare for every possible outcome? And what would happen if instead of trying to control the future, you trusted it? Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that you do not need to chase happiness, that you do not need to prove anything, that you do not need to wait for peace. Imagine the freedom of simply being, without needing to be anywhere else, without needing to be anyone else. This is not an impossible dream. This is something you can cultivate step by step, by shifting your perspective, by questioning your thoughts, by learning to see the present moment for the gift that it is. Take a deep breath. Feel the stillness around you. Know that in this moment, you are whole. You always have been. And the more you stop searching, the more you will realize that what you were looking for was never outside of you. It was always within, waiting to be seen. There comes a time when you must ask yourself, what if everything I've been searching for has been with me all along? For so long, you have been conditioned to believe that peace, happiness, and fulfillment are things to be earned, things that exist somewhere in the future, waiting for you to reach them. But Buddhism teaches that this belief is the very thing keeping you from finding them. Nothing is missing. Nothing needs to be added to you. The happiness you seek is not in the next achievement. the next relationship, the next phase of life. It is already within you, waiting to be realized. Most people spend their lives chasing an illusion. They believe that once they have more money, more success, more recognition, they will finally feel whole. But the moment they get what they wanted, they immediately begin searching for the next thing. This is the nature of the mind. It is never satisfied. It always finds something else to chase. But what if, instead of running, you stopped? What if you sat in stillness and asked yourself, what if I already have everything I need? Imagine a traveler who spends their entire life searching for treasure, traveling to distant lands, digging through endless fields, only to one day realize that the treasure was buried beneath their own home all along. This is how most people live. They search for happiness outside of themselves, never realizing that it was always within them, hidden beneath layers of distractions, fears, and false beliefs. The journey is not about finding something new. It is about uncovering what was always there. But how do you uncover this? How do you stop chasing and start seeing? The first step is awareness. Begin to notice how often your mind pulls you into the past or the future. Notice how much time you spend dwelling on regrets or worrying about things that have not yet happened. And then ask yourself, what would happen if I simply focused on right now? What would happen if, instead of looking for happiness in the future, I allowed myself to experience it in this moment? Most people believe that happiness is something to be earned, something that only comes after they have proven themselves, after they have achieved enough, after they have fixed everything that is wrong with their lives. But happiness is not a reward. It is a state of being. It is not something you arrive at, but something you cultivate by changing the way you see the world. Gratitude is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to shift your perspective. When you focus on what is missing, you create suffering. But when you focus on what is already here, you create joy. No matter where you are in life, there is always something to be grateful for. The ability to breathe, to see, to hear, to experience another day. These are gifts that so many overlook. But when you start appreciating the small things, you realize that happiness is not found in grand achievements, but in the quiet moments of everyday life. But happiness is not just about appreciation. It is also about letting go. So much of our suffering comes from holding on to things that are meant to pass. We cling to relationships, believing they define us. We hold on to expectations, believing life must unfold in a certain way. We replay old memories, unable to accept that they are gone. But Buddhism teaches that nothing in life is permanent. Everything changes. And the more we try to resist this truth, the more we suffer. Think of a river. The water flows effortlessly, adapting to whatever lies in its path. It does not try to hold on to the rocks. It does not resist the bends and curves. It simply moves, trusting that it will always find its way. But imagine if the river suddenly decided it wanted to stay in one place, that it wanted to hold on to every drop of water, that it refused to move forward. It would no longer be a river. It would become stagnant, lifeless. This is what happens when we hold on to things that are meant to pass. We stop flowing. We stop growing. We become stuck in a version of ourselves that no longer exists. But how do you let go when your mind refuses to? How do you release something that has become a part of your identity? The answer is not in fighting your thoughts, not in forcing yourself to forget, but in seeing things clearly. in recognizing that your suffering is not caused by the event itself, but by the meaning you have attached to it. Imagine holding on to a burning rope. The fire is spreading, moving closer to your hands, and the longer you hold on, the more it burns. You have two choices. You can keep gripping the rope, letting the fire consume you, or you can let go. The moment you release it, the pain stops, the suffering ends. But many people do not let go. They hold on to their pain, believing that if they release it, they are somehow giving up, somehow losing something. But what are they losing, really? Only suffering. Only unnecessary pain. The reason people struggle to let go is because they believe their pain is part of their identity. They believe that if they stop thinking about what hurt them, it means that it never mattered. But letting go does not mean forgetting. It does not mean the past did not shape you. It simply means you are choosing to stop allowing it to define you. It means you are choosing peace over suffering. Detachment does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you stop loving. It means you love without possession. It means you care without needing control. It means you trust that what is meant for you will never require you to cling to it. Think about the last time you felt truly free. Was it when you were obsessing over something, trying to control every detail? Or was it when you surrendered, when you allowed yourself to simply be without expectation, without resistance? Freedom is not found in control. It is found in trust, in trusting that life will unfold as it is meant to, whether you worry about it or not. Most people wait for something external to give them peace. They believe that if they get the job, if they find the right relationship, if they achieve the perfect life, they will finally be happy. But happiness is not something you find. It is something you create. And the more you attach your happiness to things outside of yourself, the more fragile it becomes. Because what happens when those things disappear? What happens when people leave? When circumstances change? If your happiness is tied to something external, it will always be at risk. But if your peace comes from within, nothing can take it away. Imagine standing in a storm, the wind howling, the rain pouring down. Most people try to fight the storm, trying to stop the rain, trying to control the wind. But what if, instead of fighting, you simply stood there, allowing the storm to pass? Because that is the nature of all things. They pass. No feeling is permanent. No pain lasts forever. Everything is temporary, even suffering. So why do you hold on? Why do you still replay old conversations, still carry the weight of things that no longer serve you? What would happen if, just for a moment, you loosened your grip? Take a deep breath. Release the need to control. Release the need to hold on. Trust that life will unfold exactly as it should. And in that trust, you will find the peace that has been waiting for you all along. There comes a time when you must stop fighting against the natural flow of life. For so long, you have believed that happiness is something to be earned, something to be chased, something that only comes when everything in your life is perfectly aligned. But Buddhism teaches that the need to chase, the need to control, the need to force life to unfold in a specific way is the very thing keeping you from peace. Peace is not something you find. It is something that appears when you stop resisting what is. Most people spend their lives caught in a cycle of struggle. They believe that if they just try hard enough, if they just plan everything perfectly, they can make life go exactly as they want. But life does not work this way. No matter how much you plan, no matter how much effort you put in, you cannot control everything. People will change. Circumstances will shift. The unexpected will happen. And the more you try to fight against this, the more you suffer. Imagine trying to hold on to the ocean, trying to grab the waves with your hands, trying to stop the tide from coming in. No matter how hard you try, the water will slip through your fingers. You cannot control it. You can only learn to move with it. Life is the same way. The more you try to hold on, the more you suffer. But the moment you surrender, the moment you trust that everything is unfolding as it should, you find a freedom that cannot be taken away. But how do you learn to surrender when your entire life has been built around the idea of control? How do you stop fighting against life when you have been taught that effort, that striving, that forcing things to go your way is the only path to success? The first step is awareness. Begin to notice how often you resist, how often you tell yourself that things should be different than they are, how often you try to force life into a shape that it was never meant to take. And then ask yourself, what would happen if I let go? Most people fear letting go because they believe it means giving up. They think that if they stop controlling everything, their lives will fall apart. But letting go does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you stop trying. It means you stop attaching your happiness to specific outcomes. It means you stop tying your sense of peace to things outside of yourself. It means you trust that even if things do not go as planned, you will still be okay. Think of a tree in the middle of a storm. The wind is fierce, the rain is relentless, but the tree does not fight against it. It bends. It moves with the wind instead of resisting it. And because of this, it does not break. But imagine if the tree refused to bend, if it tried to fight against the wind, if it resisted every gust, it would snap. It would be destroyed. This is how humans create suffering for themselves. Instead of adapting, instead of accepting, instead of moving with life, they resist. And in that resistance, they break. But what if you trusted that no matter what happens, you will be okay? What if, instead of fearing change, you embraced it? What if you saw every challenge not as something to fight against, but as something to move through with grace? Buddhism teaches that suffering comes not from what happens to us, but from how we respond to what happens. Pain is inevitable. Change is inevitable. Loss is inevitable. But suffering is optional. Suffering comes from resistance. It comes from the belief that things should be different than they are. But what if you accepted everything exactly as it is? What if you trusted that whatever is happening for a reason, even if you cannot see that reason yet? Most people do not realize that they are the ones creating their own suffering. They believe that if they just fix something outside of themselves, they will finally be happy. But happiness is not something that comes from fixing the outside world. It comes from shifting the way you see the world. Imagine carrying a heavy backpack filled with rocks. You have been carrying it for so long that you do not even realize how much it is weighing you down. You believe that you must keep carrying it, that it is necessary, that you cannot let it go. But what if you stopped? What if you set it down? The weight disappears instantly. The burden is gone. This is how attachment works. You hold on to things that are no longer serving you, believing that you need them, when in reality, they are the very things keeping you from peace. But how do you let go when your mind refuses to? How do you release something that has become a part of your identity? The answer is not in forcing yourself to forget. It is in seeing clearly. It is in realizing that your suffering is not coming from the event itself, but from your refusal to let it pass. Think about the last time you were truly happy. Was it when you were trying to control everything? When you were lost in overthinking? When you were consumed by worry? Or was it when you surrendered? When you let go? When you allowed yourself to simply be? Happiness is not found in control. It is found in trust. It is found in the ability to experience life fully, without fear, without hesitation, without always needing to know what happens next. The more you trust, the more you see that everything in life is temporary. Your successes, your failures, your joys, your sorrows. Nothing stays the same forever. And the more you try to hold on to something, the more pain you create for yourself. Ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped trying to control everything? What if, instead of fearing the unknown, you embraced it? What if, instead of holding on to things that are meant to pass, you allowed them to leave with gratitude? Most people believe that if they stop trying to control everything, they will lose something important. But what they do not realize is that by trying to control, they are losing something even greater. The ability to live fully without fear, without resistance. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that you do not need to chase happiness, that you do not need to prove anything, that you do not need to hold on to things that are meant to pass. Imagine the freedom of simply existing without needing to be anywhere else, without needing to be anyone else. This is not an impossible dream. This is something you can cultivate step by step, by shifting your perspective, by questioning your thoughts, by learning to see the present moment for the gift that it is. Take a deep breath. Feel the stillness around you. Know that in this moment, you are whole. You always have been. And the more you stop searching, the more you will realize that what you were looking for was never outside of you. It was always within, waiting to be seen. There comes a time when you must stop believing the mind's endless whispers that tell you something is missing. For so long, you have been conditioned to think that happiness exists in the future. That once you achieve enough, once you fix yourself, once you become the person you are meant to be, then you will finally feel whole. But Buddhism teaches that this belief is the very thing keeping you from peace. Happiness is not something to be found. It is something to be uncovered by removing everything that has been blocking it. And the greatest blockage of all is the illusion that you are incomplete. Most people live in a constant state of longing. They wake up thinking about what they lack. They move through the day believing they are not enough. They go to sleep with the feeling that something is missing. But what if nothing was missing? What if the only thing keeping you from happiness was the false belief that you needed something outside of yourself to complete you? Imagine a person searching for water, walking for miles, desperate to find a well, convinced that if they just keep moving, they will eventually quench their thirst. But what they do not realize is that beneath their feet, buried just beneath the surface, lies a vast underground spring. If they only stopped searching long enough to dig, they would find what they have been looking for all along. This is how most people live, constantly searching outside of themselves, never realizing that what they seek has always been within. But how do you stop searching when your entire life has been built around the idea that happiness is something to be earned? How do you teach yourself to believe that you are already enough when the world has told you otherwise? The first step is awareness. Begin to notice how often your mind tells you that you need more, that you need to be more. Notice how often you feel that happiness is just out of reach. And then ask yourself, what if that thought was a lie? The mind is always chasing, always seeking, always convincing you that something else will finally bring you peace. But has this ever been true? Has achieving a goal ever given you permanent happiness? Or did it just lead to the next goal, the next desire, the next thing to chase? The moment you see this pattern clearly, you begin to break free from it. You begin to understand that happiness is not something that comes later. It is something that is available in every moment, if only you allow yourself to experience it. Gratitude is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to shift your perspective. When you focus on what is missing, you create suffering. But when you focus on what is already here, you create joy. No matter what your circumstances, there is always something to be grateful for. The breath in your lungs, the warmth of the sun, the ability to feel, to think, to love. These are not small things. They are miracles. And when you begin to see them as such, you start to understand that happiness was never something you had to wait for. It was always available, waiting for you to notice it. But happiness is not just about appreciation. It is also about letting go. So much of our suffering comes from holding on to things that are meant to pass. We cling to relationships, believing they define us. We hold on to expectations, believing life must unfold in a certain way. We replay old mistakes, unable to forgive ourselves. But Buddhism teaches that everything in life is impermanent. Nothing stays the same. And the more we try to resist this truth, the more we suffer. Think of a person standing in the ocean, trying to hold on to the waves. They grip tightly, convinced that if they just try hard enough, they can stop the water from moving. But no matter how much effort they put in, the waves slip through their fingers. This is how life works. The more you try to control it, the more it moves beyond your grasp. But the moment you release, the moment you allow things to be as they are, the struggle disappears. But how do you let go when your mind refuses to? How do you release something that has become a part of your identity? The answer is not in forcing yourself to forget, not in pretending that things do not matter, but in seeing things clearly, in recognizing that your suffering is not caused by what happened, but by your refusal to let it pass. Imagine holding onto a rope that is being pulled away from you. The tighter you grip, the more it burns your hands. But the moment you let go, the pain stops. The suffering ends. But many people do not let go. They hold on to their pain, believing that if they release it, they are somehow losing a part of themselves. But what are they really losing? Only suffering. Only unnecessary weight. Detachment does not mean you stop caring. It does not mean you become indifferent. It means you love without possession. It means you experience fully, without the need to control. It means you trust that what is meant for you will stay, and what is not will leave. And when you begin to live this way, you realize that peace was never something you had to chase. It was something that appeared the moment you stopped clinging. Most people fear letting go because they believe that if they do, they will lose control. But the truth is, control is an illusion. No matter how much you plan, no matter how much you try to force life to go a certain way, things will always unfold in ways you cannot predict. And the more you accept this, the more peace you will find. Think about the last time you felt truly free. Was it when you were trying to control everything? When you were filled with worry? When you were consumed by expectations? Or was it when you surrendered, when you trusted, when you allowed yourself to simply be? True peace is not found in having all the answers. It is found in realizing that you do not need them. It is found in understanding that life is not meant to be figured out. It is meant to be experienced. And the more you allow yourself to experience it without resistance, the more you see that what you were looking for was never in the future. It was always here, waiting for you to notice it. Imagine waking up one morning and realizing that you no longer need to chase anything, that you no longer need to prove anything, that you no longer need to hold on to things that are meant to pass. Imagine the freedom of simply existing without needing to be anywhere else, without needing to be anyone else. This is not an impossible dream. This is something you can cultivate step by step, by shifting your perspective, by questioning your thoughts, by learning to see the present moment for the gift that it is. Take a deep breath. Feel the stillness around you. Know that in this moment, you are whole. You always have been. And the more you stop searching, the more you will realize that what you were looking for was never outside of you. It was always within, waiting to be seen. There comes a time when you must stop waiting for life to be perfect before allowing yourself to feel at peace. You have spent so much of your life believing that happiness is something to be earned, that once you have fixed everything, once you have reached your goals, once everything finally makes sense, then you will finally feel whole. But Buddhism teaches that this is an illusion. There is no perfect moment. There is no final destination where all of your worries disappear. The only peace that exists is the peace you allow yourself to feel right now. Most people do not realize that they are the ones delaying their own happiness. They convince themselves that they need more success, more validation, more control. They wake up every morning thinking about what is missing, believing that once they fill the gap, they will finally be content. But what if the gap does not actually exist? What if the only thing keeping you from happiness is the belief that you do not already have it? Imagine a person searching for their glasses, turning the house upside down, frustrated, anxious, convinced that they have lost them, only to realize that they were on their head the entire time. This is how most people live. They spend their lives searching for happiness outside of themselves, unaware that it was within them all along. The journey is not about finding something new. It is about realizing that nothing was ever missing. But how do you train your mind to see what has always been there? How do you stop searching when searching is all you have ever known? The first step is to become aware of how often your mind tells you that you are incomplete. Notice how often you believe that happiness exists somewhere in the future, that peace is something you must earn. And then ask yourself, has this belief ever brought you peace? Has delaying happiness ever made you happy? Or has it only kept you trapped in an endless cycle of seeking? The mind is always convincing you that you need something more. It tells you that once you fix yourself, once you achieve enough, once you become the person the world expects you to be, then you will finally feel whole. But the truth is, you do not need fixing. You are never broken. The idea that you are incomplete is an illusion, and the moment you stop believing it, you set yourself free. Gratitude is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to shift your perspective. When you focus on what is missing, you create suffering. But when you focus on what is already here, you create joy. No matter what is happening in your life, there is always something to be grateful for. The breath in your lungs, the ability to think, to feel, to experience life. These are not small things. They are miracles. And when you begin to see them as such, you start to understand that happiness was never something you had to chase. It was something that was always within you, waiting to be noticed. But happiness is not just about appreciation. It is also about letting go. So much of our suffering comes from holding on to things that are meant to pass. We cling to relationships, believing they define us. We hold on to expectations, believing life must unfold in a certain way. We replay old mistakes, unable to forgive ourselves. But Buddhism teaches that everything in life is impermanent. Nothing stays the same. And the more we try to resist this truth, the more we suffer. Think of a river. The water does not cling to the rocks. It does not try to hold on to the past. It simply moves forward, flowing effortlessly, adapting to whatever lies ahead. But imagine if the river refused to move, if it tried to hold on to every drop of water, if it resisted every bend and turn. It would become stagnant. It would stop being a river. This is how life works.